Hi, Carol. Lily, please.
Okay, good evening, everyone. I'm Professor Lily Zamir, the co-founder and the academic director of WHISC. It's my honor and pleasure to open the first international panel of WHISC, Women in the Holocaust International Studies Center on Women as Saviors. Our panel is the first out of two panels devoted to this topic, and we'll focus today on Jewish women who saved Jews during the Holocaust. Nonetheless, their deeds, stories, and sometimes the whole biographies were somehow neglected or pushed aside from our collective memory. The second panel at the end of October will be devoted to non-Jewish women who saved Jews during the Holocaust. This session will be moderated by Dr. Batya Brutin, a distinguished scholar, a member of the steering committee and board of WHISC, and if I be a little bit personal, a dear friend and colleague of mine for the last 30 years. Dear Batya, the floor is yours.
Wow. Thank you very much. And hello, everyone. Since Lily already told you that this is the first panel on the topic of women as saviors, I'll continue. And before I begin, I have the great honor to invite Professor Lily Zamir, the co-founder of and academic director of WHISC, to deliver opening remarks, if you have any.
No, I've done it.
Okay, so the panel today, in this panel today, we will uncover the lesser known phenomenon and reveal untold stories about unknown Jewish women who saved Jews. Now, it is my great pleasure to invite the first speaker, Professor Beverley Chalmers, who is an independent scholar from Kingston, Ontario, Canada, and a member of WHISC Academic Steering Committee. Professor Chalmers examines women's and children's sexual and just a second. Let me just finish, Bev.
I'm not doing anything.
I don't know what's going on here.
No, that's not me.
Someone, okay. Never mind. She examines women's and children's sexual and reproductive lives in difficult religious, social, political, and economic situations, including the apartheid South Africa, in the former Soviet Union, in women with female genital mutilation, in the technologically developed world, in the Nazi era, and among children sexually abused globally. She has 2 doctoral degrees, a PhD in psychology and a DSc in medicine, and she has held full professorial position in Canada and South Africa. She has over 300 publications, including 11 books, and has given over 470 presentations globally. She completed over 140 international health promotions missions for the United Nations and other global aids. Professor Charles will talk about Holocaust heroines, and Bev, the floor is yours.
Thank you. If I can just share the screen.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you very much. I will be talking today about my new book, Holocaust Heroines, which was written together with Dr. Dana Solomon. And this is about Jewish women who saved Jewish children. And by the way, it is published today. Today is its first official day. So now I cannot change the screen. There you go. In the book, we discuss 108 Jewish women. And we must note that every woman who tried to save her own child or her children is a Holocaust heroine. But in this book, we talk about women who saved large groups of Jewish children. Some saved hundreds, others saved smaller groups. How many children survived? About 1.5 million were killed. Only 10% of Jewish children survived, and altogether about 33% of the Jews of Europe survived. Not all attempts to save children were recorded. Some were unsuccessful. Some survivors never reported the rescue. Some children didn't know who their rescuer was and couldn't report it. Some rescues were successful, but the rescuer herself died. And some were successful and were reported. And these are the ones we tend to know about. How many rescuers were there? Far too few is the only real answer. At most, 0.5% of the population in Nazi-occupied lands actually helped. The other remainder, 99.5%, were possibly active perpetrators or complicit bystanders. There's no record of those who helped in small ways. Some gave Jews food or shelter. Some didn't reveal Jews that were hidden. Some died while they were trying to help Jews. Some died later after they had helped Jews. And these acts are usually not recorded. Yad Vashem honors non-Jews who rescued or helped Jews, and with the title of Righteous Among Nations. About 28,000 or more have been recognized. About half of them are women, but they do not recognize Jewish rescuers. In more recent years, the Jewish Rescue Citation has been given to some Jewish women and men who rescued people by B'nai Brit, the World Center, and a committee to recognize the heroism of Jewish rescuers. And that 600 of them include both men and women. There are Jewish women rescuers from countries all over the world. And I won't list them all here, but there are many names across the countries. How were children rescued? What happened to them? And I will try to give a brief overview of these many rescues in this talk. Some were provided with false documents. They were smuggled out of ghettos. They were helped to cross borders. Some were simply hidden. Some children were warned of impending actions and had a chance to escape. In the camps, some people gave extra food or easier work, or even eliminated names from death lists. The partisan groups hid some children. Underground resistance groups managed to free some prisoners, including children. Some rabbis gave spiritual leadership. Some medical assistance was given. Some community leaders exploited contacts to help children or Jews. And some created children's homes. And some couldn't help them escape, but gave emotional support to help them at least mentally escape from their horrors. Escapes happened at all times. In the pre-war period, the Youth Aliyah program of Refa Fry in particular rescued about 4,000 children before war broke out. Beata Berger nurse in Berlin moved 300 children to British Mandatory Palestine before war broke out. The kinder transport we know about, 10,000 children, about 7,500 of them were Jewish from many countries. In the Czech Republic, for example, Mari Schmolka was very active in listing these children and helping to get them. And she was the one who invited Nicholas Winton to help. But Nicholas Winton gets most of the credit for the kinder transport today. We also notice that men are recognized for helping, but not often their female counterparts. And we know, of course, about Janusz Korczak, who is honored, but not his close associate, Stefania Wilczynska. There is, for example, a statue of Nicholas Winton in Prague Station, and he's honored as a hero. He actually spent about 3 weeks in Czechoslovakia before war broke out, and he didn't personally transport any children. But a Czech filmmaker has made 3 films about him, which honor him enormously, and it somewhat whitewashes the role of the Czechoslovak people in the collaboration with the Nazis. The lucky ones, we believe, were the Kindertransport children, but they were not always so lucky. They had to adopt new identities. They were not often, infrequently rescued in Jewish homes. Many were abused. Only few were reunited with their families, and many had little or inadequate education. So although they were saved, they had a difficult time too. It was also difficult for families in ghettos to part from their children. Which children should be saved was always a question. Often it could only be one of two or three or four. Did they look Jewish? Could they hide their Jewishness? Were they circumcised, making boys more difficult to save? Were they fluent in the local language? Could they adopt a new identity? Could they mix in with Christian or Catholic practices? Could the families trust Gentile rescuers? And was there a probability that they would be converted, that they would experience what was called spiritual murder or shmat? Families asked the rabbis for advice. Should they relinquish their children? And one of the responses from the rabbis was, we must not acquiesce to the spiritual destruction of our children. What is the use of saving several hundred children? Let them perish or survive together with the entire community. Some defied the rabbis and gave their children to rescuers. Irina Sendler rescued a baby, Beata Koppa. She told the grandfather the child would have to be baptized, and the family was heartbroken. But a few days later, they sent a package for the baby. Inside, carefully wrapped, was an exquisite lace christening gown and a bright golden crucifix for the baby, wrapped carefully in tissue paper. There was no note, but there didn't need to be. Irina Sendler also was reputed to have saved 2,500 children, and it presents Poland in a very positive light. The reality is she saved about 300 children, but more importantly, she worked for the director of the childcare services in Warsaw, Jan Dobrzyński. And he insisted that the rescues would be conditional on the children being baptized. And if the parents returned, he said, they could then reclaim the child for Judaism. And when he was challenged with this and asked and said, this is not fair, he said, take it or leave it. And in some people, they think about this as another way to attack Jews, to kill the Jew in the child. Religion and ideology played a role too. Religious institutions often baptized children, not only for their safety, although it was essential also for their safety, but also to save their souls. And we ask the question, is baptism under duress like this a valid Christian or Catholic procedure? Pope Pius XII refused to encourage giving these children back to Jewish families or Jewish agencies after the war. And in 2023, he's done a very interesting thing. He beatified a Polish family of 9 who were killed for hiding Jews. And I always wonder, why just this family of 9 today? Is this kind of an apology for papal omissions of the time? Gilbert and Eleanor Krause, an American couple, rescued 50 children. And America had restricted limits, had huge quota limits on children, and especially Jewish people being rescued. And what this couple did was to take visas that had already been allocated to people as part of the quota system, but had never been collected. Maybe the family couldn't afford it or had been relocated already or killed. And they gave those visas to unallocated children and saved about 50 of them, brought them back to the States. During wartime, children were often hidden. Can we mute the readers, please? During wartime, children were often hidden. They had to adopt a new identity, a new language. They had to adopt a new identity, a new language. They had to keep the secret that they were Jewish. They had to avoid Jewish mannerisms or way of speaking. They had to adopt Christian customs. Of course, children who were circumcised, the boys, were more difficult to hide. And the children themselves felt alone or abandoned, afraid, betrayed. They wondered what had happened, why their parents had abandoned them, felt confused, and some were emotionally, physically, and sexually abused. There were multiple organizations who helped across many countries in hiding these children, in homes, in religious institutions, and in orphanages. And some were smuggled across borders. And for those of us who were lucky enough to ever see Marcel Marceau, the master of mime, he was one of the people who actually rescued children and smuggled them across the borders. Another couple, Odette Rosenstock and Moussa Abadi, in France, in Nice, hid over the period of the last few years, hid 527 children and smuggled some of them across borders. Some were hidden with their parents. They were held by Catholics and Protestants in France, in Nice. And there were very complex challenges for them. For example, there was a 6-year-old little boy and his sister, and the little boy had promised his mother he would look after his sister. And when they wanted to take his sister away to hide her somewhere else, he sat on the sister and wouldn't let them take her. So they had to find a family that would take the 2 of them together. Another little girl, Jeanette Wolgost, had the leading role in a play in school, and she was very worried that she would be the only one who didn't have family in the audience. So Odette herself managed to come and bring her little brother to see the play as well. Odette was denounced in 1944. She was imprisoned in Auschwitz and in Bergen-Belsen. She survived, but she and Musa never spoke about their activities for decades. In Belgium, there was another interesting experience. There were 7 Jewish orphanages that were created with the approval of the Gestapo in Belgium. And some of these were different in nature. For example, Jonas Tieffenbrunner and his wife Ruth kept a very frum home and continued to care for the children in that home until 1960. Madame Marie Albert Bloom also had a home. It was a Zionist philosophy, and it altogether cared for about 150 children. And in the years of the war, they helped to find them foster families. 65 children remained safely with her at the end of the war, and they continued to look after them for decades as well. Some other unusual rescues were children who rescued children, little girls who rescued other children. In Belarus, there were 4 little girls of between 10 and 12 years old who managed to take and lead groups of children out of the ghettos into safety across borders. In France, there's another little girl of 13, and in Belgium, there was a group of 100 students whose school had been closed down, who formed a group, and helped to support each other. Only 11 of them survived, but many were supported for many years. Some people could only offer emotional support, and Friedel Dicker-Breindas, an artist of quite some repute, was imprisoned in Theresienstadt. She taught the children art while in Theresienstadt, and she helped them to escape in their imaginations and to sign their names, to give them back their names, not just numbers. She encouraged meditation that emancipated them from the confinement that they were in. And she was involved in the production of Fireflies and Brundibar, some artistic productions in the camp. Her art here is shown, but the middle one in 1943 was one of the last paintings she did. And this painting inspired me to use this as the cover image for my book. And I must thank Marguerite Schlein, who is here today, who helped me organize this. In the camps, some, like Hadassah Rosenstoff, helped children also. She had a Kinderheim in Bergen-Belsen, a children's home for 149 children, and all but one of them survived. And in 1949, she went with 100 of these children to Israel. Others who did similar things, Luba Trzynska and Hermina Kranz, I'm sorry if I mispronounced them, saved 90 children. And Henny Birnbaum and her husband, Jehoshua, rescued children in Westerbork in the Netherlands, and 200 children in Bergen-Belsen, where she was ultimately moved to. She had 6 children of her own who also survived, and altogether she and her husband cared for 350 children and helped them, rescued them. Others moved children out of Europe after the war. Ruth Gruber accompanied 1,000 people, mostly Jewish, including children, to Oswego in the USA. Lena Kushler-Silverman moved 100 children from Poland to Israel on her own, a remarkable story. Her book there is My 100 Children. The Marcel Network, which is what Musa and Odette Abadi were called, spent years reuniting children with families after the war. There were also Jewish women who retrieved children who had been placed in foster homes or in orphanages. There are many of them listed there. Sarah Schneer-Nishmet was one of them, and she was one who actually helped found the Ghetto Fighters House in Israel. The children's perspectives of these children who were in foster homes, many were very happy with their families. Some held anti-Semitic views, which they had learned in these families. Many, the little ones in particular, had forgotten Judaism and their roots. Often they were resistant to so-called rescue. They didn't like the families or the people who'd come to take them away to live in orphanages or to go to Israel. They were often unhappy with their new so-called relatives that they didn't know. They often spoke a different language. And if they were rescued and put into families, they often preferred to be in group homes, in orphanages, rather than be with individual families. Some converted willingly to Christianity, and some entered the religious life. One of them is Cardinal Jean-Marie Lustiger, who became the Archbishop of Paris and later a cardinal. He was Jewish and remained Jewish and Catholic all his life. Foster families had different perspectives. They loved the children, many of them, as their own, and they resisted relinquishing them. Some didn't even know they were Jewish children. They had baptized most of the children in order to save their souls. Some, on the other hand, did relinquish them willingly, but asked for compensation. They had to be paid to give the children back. Some ransomed the children, bargained even to give them more money to give the children back to the Jewish agencies that were trying to find them. And some insisted, for example, that they inherit the child's family's assets before they relinquish the child.
Bev?
There are moral dilemmas. I'm at the end. There are moral dilemmas. Was it right to remove children from loving homes? Was their Jewish identity more important than their happiness? Did the parents want to save their lives or their Jewish identity? And the rescuers had some justifications that some children were abused. If their Jewish origins became known, it might expose them to anti-Semitism. The children might grow up to be anti-Semitism. And at the time, it was believed that children forget their trauma. Children in institutions were baptized. Church saw them as Catholics. Some were active proselytizing orders. Some kept the children's parents' names secret. Some kept the adoptive family's identity secret. And we need to ask if baptism under duress is legitimate. Rabbi Herzog appealed to the Pope at least 4 times in 1945 not to convert the children and to return them to Jewish rescuers, and he would not do so. These are very moral dilemmas: removing children from happy homes, presenting Axis countries in a positive light, the church's role, how lucky were the kinder transport children, and representing children in rescuers in film are usually men and not women. And the words we use, is it retrieve or rescue or save? Were they actually in danger? Were they rescued? Did they need to be rescued? Or were they to be returned to Judaism? So we wrote this book to honor Jewish child rescuers, especially women child rescuers. 108 women. There were likely many, many more, but we may never know them or recognize them. And we wrote this book with respect and gratitude. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Bev, for a knowledgeable and enlightening talk. The second speaker is Professor Lily Halpert Zamir. She is a professor of Holocaust and Gender Studies at the David Yellin Academic College of Education in Jerusalem. She is a member of the Academic Council and the head of its Center for Women's and Gender Studies. Professor Zamir has published several books, 6 of which deal with the Holocaust, and dozens of articles in Hebrew and English that focus on Holocaust and gender studies. Professor Zamir will talk, just a second. Is that okay, Lily?
Yeah.
Okay. So as you see, Professor Zamir is going to talk about Sara Zarkin Epstein, an unknown multifarious rescuer. Please, Lily.
Thank you, Batya. Well, Sara Zarkin is one of so many lost voices of outstanding Jewish women who saved Jews during the Holocaust, but had been forgotten by the arbitrariness of history. Sara Zarkin had 3 crucial disadvantages that prevented her of becoming one of the well-known figures from the region of Kovno during the Holocaust, as well as from our Holocaust collective memory. Number 1, she was a woman, and our collective memory did not cherish female heroines. Number 2, she didn't belong to any youth movement or well-known political Zionist organization. Number 3, she was Jewish, and until not very long ago, Jews who saved Jews were taken for granted. Can you please shut your mics because it's very disturbing?
And I can't see who is. Shh.
Thank you. So who was Sara? And how come that I could barely find any information about her and her deeds, although they were so outstanding and courageous? Sara Zarkin was born in a little town called Ester Village, sometimes around the First World War. She had no documents and no idea when exactly she was born. It was a small town, established somewhere during the 9th century, 100 kilometers from Kovno, and with about 100 Jewish families that were living there for centuries. In 1939, when the war broke out, there was an active small Jewish community there, with 1 or 2 Jewish elementary schools, 1 Jewish library, 1 Beit Midrash for the men to study Judaism and Talmud and Torah, and also a few synagogues. That's all. When the Soviet Union took over Lithuania in 1940, Sara was in school in Kovno, because in her town there was no high school for Jewish boys and girls. There was no high school at all there, such a little place it was. So Sara was already in high school, had to go to Kovno. In 1941, when the Germans occupied the town, she was hurried back by her family back home. The family at that stage included her parents, and 9 brothers and sisters, a typical Eastern European religious Jewish family. When the Germans occupied Kovno, the family house was taken by the Wehrmacht forces, which was very lucky for them, because one of the officers agreed to let the family stay in one of the rooms in exchange for their work as servants for all the soldiers and officers that were staying there. All the other Jews of the little town were pushed into a ghetto, which was established in one of the Jewish streets of the town. 3 months later, a local police chief, who was a friend of the family, warned them that all the Jews of the little town were going to be killed, and suggested them to run away, not telling a soul about what he had told them. The family, of course, escaped, but not before Sara ran to the ghetto, endangering her life, her family's life, and the policeman's life, and she asked the people to try and hide and flee. Unfortunately, no one believed her. They were quite comfortable in that little ghetto, and they believed that it's going to be better, but not worse. So she was running in the streets of the ghetto, crying and asking them, please, please flee, please escape. But they thought that she went out of her mind, out of misery or something, and ignored her. After 2 days, while Sara and her family was already in another family's house hiding, she heard that all the Jews from the ghetto, except of a few that heard to her advice, listened to what she warned them, but all the others were taken out to the woods and shot by the Lithuanian police. Only about a handful survived, thanks to Sara. Next, Sara and her mother and a niece of the family took shelter in another friend's house, who was also a policeman. One day, the policeman informed Sara that she must run away because he heard from his colleagues that the local police is trying to find Jews that were somehow lucky to escape the shooting in the woods. And they might come and look in that house as well. Sara ran as fast as she could. She was young and strong, but her mother and niece couldn't run so fast, and they were taken out from the shelter and shot. Sara recalled in her testimony that even though she was 30 years old, she still remembers how awful it was. She heard them screaming, dying. She couldn't do a thing. She was just hiding and trying not to cry, because had she cried, they would also, of course, found her and kill her. In the early 1942, Sara was hiding in a farmhouse. The farmers, the family Rikchewicz, who later on became recognized as righteous among the nations by Yad Vashem, gave her shelter. The farmer's wife was sick, and the son took her to Kovno to a doctor. When they came home, they told Sara about the ghetto, the big ghetto in Kovno. It was an open ghetto. The Jews could go out to work and come back afternoon. But obviously they couldn't flee from there because the population was very, very collaborative with the Nazis. They told her that they heard that the Jews from the ghetto are going to be killed or removed. They didn't know exactly, but they heard that some changes, and not for the best, will happen for that population. Sara asked the family to give her pens and paper, and she wrote letters warning the people from the ghetto to flee. And then she begged the family, the Jewish family, to go back and deliver the letters to the population of the ghetto. The family risked their lives and they went back, and they gave the letters to some of her relatives and friends and asked them to deliver it to the other people. Only few Jews read the letters and believed what was written there. Only very few of them took her advice and escaped. Her saviors were generous enough to offer shelter and food for all the Jews who did escape following Sara's warning. Thus, the family gave shelter to more than 100 Jews, including food. And later on, Sara coordinated their arrival from that farm to other farms, where they found shelter and food again. Among those 100 people who were saved from the Kovno ghetto thanks to Sara's letters was a family with a 7-year-old boy. The boy and his mother got shelter in one of the farmhouses nearby. That boy, Aaron Barak, later on became the president of the Supreme Court in Israel. At the end of summer 1944, when the Red Army came close to the farm, the Jews were hiding between double-walled pits and storage houses in the farm until they were liberated by the Soviets in October 1944. When the Soviets came back to power, some nationalists who collaborated in the past with the Nazis in killing Jews tried to oppose them. Sara joined a Jewish group who tried to take revenge on those nationalists, and she collected information about them and their plans and handed it to the Soviets. She acted under a cover name, a Lithuanian cover name, so they didn't know who she was. Hence, she was a heroine again. She saved some of her fellow men, the Soviet forces, in the Soviet forces. Not much later, she met a Jew called Moses Epstein, and they married. Between 1946 and 47, both of them became involved in saving Jewish children who survived the Holocaust and moved them with the help of the Zionist Rescue Organization to illegal immigrant ships that took the children to Palestine. Unfortunately, Sara and Moses were caught, and they were put to prison in a Soviet gulag for more than 8 years. At the time, Sara was pregnant at the last 2 months of her pregnancy. Unfortunately, because of the horrible conditions in the gulag, she had a miscarriage and she could never got pregnant again. After their liberation from the gulag, and I remind you again, 8 years, not a day, not 2, 8 years, they lived for a while in Kovno. They wanted to immigrate from there, but in order to immigrate, according to the local rules, they had to divorce each other. So they divorced and they succeeded to immigrate. In 1960, the Epsteins succeeded to immigrate to Mexico when they had already some of the relatives that arrived there much before the war. In Mexico, they remarried and they built a life, but they unfortunately had never children of their own. After many, many years, Sara agreed to visit her family in Israel and told her story to Angel Pepper, a journalist from the Haaretz newspaper in 2007. After she was honored by Yad Vashem for her deeds as a savior in a very modest, non-advertised ceremony. Sara preferred to remain unknown because she was always afraid of being caught and punished for her deeds in the revenge groups. Thus, she refused to expand speaking about what she did when she was in those groups. She always said that she saved many, many lives, but she never said how. That's Sara's story. This is a story that could so easily be forgotten or unknown for most of us. Eventually, even for me, it was quite new, and I was trying and doing my best to find materials about her. I believe that unless this panel and my words about Sara, her voice could remain unheard for all the future generations. I'm very, very thankful that I had the opportunity to discover her story and give her a voice. And I'm hoping that all the other voices of so many brave women, Jewish women, who saved so many Jews during the Holocaust will be revealed and heard in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lily, for revealing Sara's story. It is very important to explore such stories. And Rachel, do you want me to share?
Yeah, you can share.
Okay. Just a second.
Remember to operate the sound as well.
I did, I think. Now, the last but not least speaker is Rachel Hadayo, a doctoral student and research assistant of Professor Shmuel Rafael at Bar Ilan University. Rachel has been researching the Holocaust in various fields for about 40 years. Her doctoral dissertation deals with dramatic historical aspects in the story of the extermination of the Jewish community of Saloniki, a community which Rachel's family come from. In recent years, together with the Professor Rafael, she has been busy with some unique projects related to the story of the Holocaust of Greek Jews, which is still less known to the public, or we would say only superficially and partially known. Rachel, as you see, is going to talk about Ester, Maestro-Zadikariyio, the good angel from Auschwitz. Please, Rachel.
Thank you. Batya, just put the PowerPoint on show, because like that we can't hear the sound when we'll get to there, okay?
I don't understand what you're saying.
There is the sound on the second slide.
Uh-huh.
So you have to change the format of the presentation.
I don't think so.
Okay.
Not on slideshow, Batya.
Just a second. Everything is working.
Okay, fine.
Batya, you have to do it on slideshow on the bottom.
It's okay.
No. Just a second. Just a second. It must be perfect. Is that okay now?
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
Yes, fine.
So thank you, Batya, and thank you, WHISC, for the opportunity to participate in this important panel. As Batya said, I'm a doctoral student at Ilan University. My doctoral dissertation is about the Sephardic Jewish community in Salonika and Rabbi Dr. Tzvi Simcha Koretz in the years between 33 to 43, which was the end of the existing of this community. My dissertation is written under the guidance of two of the best researchers in the field of the research. Professor Shmuel Rafael is with us on the panel this evening. He is the Dean of the Jewish Studies at Bar-Ilan University and one of the greatest researchers of Ladino cultural and Judaism of Jewish communities of the Balkan. Professor Rafael is with us, as I said, and the second one is Professor Dina Porat, who is the chief historian of Yad Vashem in Jerusalem and one of the leader researchers in the field my thesis is dealing. I became convinced of the character of Ester Maestro, whom I will describe in the next few minutes, several years ago, when I decided, after many, many years of researching the Holocaust of, just a second, I missed something. After several years, just a second, I'm sorry, something jumped. Okay, I decided after many years of researching the Holocaust Eastern European Jews to return and deal with my family history originated in Salonika in Greece. The character of Ester, or as she was called at home and by her friend Esterina, appeared in a unique book of its kind that was published in the mid-80s by Shmuel Rafael, then young student on his 20s, and the book called Bintivei Sheol means in English roots of hell, or in Greek Odromos tis Kolaseus. This book, consisting an edited collection of 62 testimonies of Jewish Holocaust survivors from Greece, whose voices, in fact, until the publication of the book, were not heard. We will not deal with the reason of this within the short time frame. Still, I will say only this. Shmuel Rafael, today Professor Rafael, took a simple tape recorder and came to the home of the survivor and took their testimonies about their lives in Greece and the survival during the Holocaust. These testimony stories of the Jews of Greece were exposed to the world, in fact, for the first time. Till then, this story was in a way hidden. And from that moment on, it began penetrated to the public and researchers' consciousness. Today, this entire project, as Batya mentioned, is undergoing a complex process of treatment and analysis to upload all testimonies to the website that will allow access, hearing the testimonies, reading them in full, and researching content. I'm very proud and very grateful, of course, for the privilege to take a significant part in this important project together with Professor Rafael and with my colleagues Anat Avraham and Nurit Sar. And now to our hero, Ester. At the beginning of my words, I would like to refer to the subtitle of my lecture, The Good Angel from Auschwitz, and to say that there is a book with this title written by Professor Gidon Greif. The book deals with the story of Jaco Maestro, Ester's younger brother. My choice to use this title for my lecture stemmed from the desire to give an expression and empowerment to a woman whose story was not heard at all, and not because it wasn't not worthy of being written down and told. Still, because of her personality and due to a complex life and reality she had even after the Holocaust to the rest of her life, she was not a magnetic person to researchers and writers like her brother, Jaco. But in her actions there in the hell of Auschwitz, many owes life to her heroism. Please change the slide, Batya. Esther was born in Greece, the daughter of Yitzhak and Grazia Maestro and sister to Jaco, Daniel, and Jana. She arrived at Auschwitz concentration camp when she was already 29 years old. Esther studied at French school in Salonika, and after she finished the 5th grade, she decided to learn Italian and went to private school. In the last year of her studies, her father fell ill with asthma, and it was not possible to pay for the private school, so she went to work repairing socks. By the way, that's what she did probably for the rest of her life after the Holocaust. Her father was a translator at the central train station of Salonika. He spoke 16 languages, and he used to stamp tourist passport at the border police. He would meet the Jewish tourists who fled from Germany in those years and bring them home to eat with the family. And that's how she also learned the language of the Germans. She was in the Jewish movement named Akoach, the Force in English, which was a sport drama movement. If there is some noises, if you can just close your microphone.
Mute yourself, please. Okay.
Years later, she recalls songs that she used to sing as a member of this Zionist Jewish youth movement. It is a unique opportunity for you to listen to her voice, as this is one of the very few that left. The song you will hear is in Ladino, the language of the Sephardic Jewish at the Balkan. Please, Batya.
La tierra no es piedrita y de muevo, a no será vuestra nación, no es vencida y su brillo renacerá. Cuerpo y alma ofreceremos en este combate, libertad demandaremos al país rescate. Vino la hora esperada, Israel su tierra amada. Nuestra tierra no es piedrita y de nuevo a no será.
Thank you. When the Germans entered Salonika, the Greeks welcomed them with flowers and kisses. The family of Ester fled to the neighborhood number 151, far from the sea and from the bombing that were part of the occupation act of the city. Esther and her family were forced to move later on to the Baron Hirsch neighborhood, which was located next to the old railway station used for goods transportation. There was also the SS office of Salonika. Please change the slide. We can see here what remains now from the Baron Hirsch neighborhood in Salonika. It was a very poor place. It's named after the Baron Hirsch, who donated the money to build this neighborhood after the great burn of Salonika in 1917. There at the station, nearby Baron Hirsch, Esther started her first experience speaking German and making kind of contact with the SS troopers by selling them small stuff such as small mirror, papers for a cigarette, or knitting them a sweater. In exchange, they used to give her bread or sometimes money, which had no much value anymore. All this in order to keep good relations with them and to try and survive the horrific starvation that was in Salonika at that time. On March 17, 1943, Esther was deported along with all her family members in the second transport that left the Baron Hirsch train station to Auschwitz. They were sent among the first because they were lived close to the station. Please change the slide. We can see in this slide the station which is still existing. It's not really functioning. And at the entrance to this little station, you can see this plaque commemorating, of course, the fact that about 50,000 Jewish from Salonika were sent from here by 19 transport from the 15th of March 1943 to August 1943, to all of them to Auschwitz, and most of them were not remain alive. From the Salonican jury left about 1,900 people, that's all. So it's about 98% of extermination in this community. When the transport that Esther was on arrived at a small station between Birkenau and Auschwitz, what we so-called the Judenrampe, Esther and her sister were separated from her mother and brothers. The mother was immediately sent to be exterminated, while her brothers were sent with a group of men to Auschwitz I. Her first encounter in this place with the German language was a sign, Arbeit macht frei, works liberate, and the horrific shouts that were thrown at them along with beating at every step. After 3 nightmarish weeks in the quarantine, Esther was placed with a group of Greek women in the counting order. During the counting order, which we say Zelapel, they were constantly beaten up because they did not understand the order given to them in German. Many died during this counting order from beating or from dehydration. This was the moment that Esther understood that she might be the great help to her sister to suffer, thanks to her previous knowledge in German. On that day, one of her friends, René Bivas, managed to steal a knife from one of the German couples in order to slice the bread they were given. Esther was accused of theft and brought before the German couple to be punished. In her attempt to defend her life, began speaking in German, explaining that she is not the thief and that is not how she was brought up at home, to steal. The couple was surprised and impressed by the German in her mouth, and instead of punishment, gave her clean clothes and appointed her as an interpreter to the Greek prisoners' woman. During the counting order, Esther would translate the instruction and then distribute the portions of bread and coffee to them. thereby preventing the beating of the unfortunate prisoners. One of the worst difficult problems was the lack of water. The prisoners were waiting for the rain to drink some drops or to moisten their body that had dried up. The Ukrainian women prisoners who have been in the camp for a longer time than the Greeks used to finish all water, which reached only one place in Birkenau. A Belgian prisoner named Mala used to come with a water shipment. The Greek women prisoners were helpless due to their inability to understand speak German. Esther took the role and explained to Mala what was happening. Mala asked Esther to accompany her to the Lager Commandant, the camp commander's officer, where she was required to stand still and explain the matter. Esther resolutely explained in a language barrier of Greek prisoners and the fact that the Greek prisoners were parched from thirst. Amazingly, instead of being punished for the request, Esther received permission to take 150 Greek girls to the shower without guarding, to get bath and to drink. In those days, one of her brother, Jaco, was appointed capo. Later, he was foreman in Auschwitz I. He managed to contact Esther, and she smuggled cigarettes and oil to lubricate the girls' skin because of the dryness and the cold. Their skin would be injured, and anyone who was found to have any wound on her skin would be sent to selection to her death in the gas chamber. During selections, Esther made sure to hide sick girls in the back of the upper bunks. In one of the biggest selections, they took out hundreds of Greek girls, over 400 Greek girls, who were sent to Block 25. Among them was Esther herself. Block 25 was the collection block near the extermination complex number 2 in Birkenau, where they held those who destined to be exterminated. Esther's capo managed to get Esther off of the block, claiming her importance and as the sole interpreter. Esther was not satisfied with her rescue and managed to smuggle 5 more women out of Block 25 and return them to the block. After a while, when she stopped translating, since the number of the Greek prisoners reduced dramatically after the action, Esther was placed to work at the sauna. In the evening, the SS used to come to the shower, and she was listening to their talk, what would be for the next day, selection or transport. She passed that information to the girls in order to make sure that none of them would remain in the block the next morning, even if she's sick. Women would stand in lines and cry, and when they saw her, they asked her to save them. This was a group of women who worked making hoses for the cleaning guns. During the selection in the block, she took 14 naked women and put packages in their hands, and when they got to Dr. Mengele, who operated the selection, she stood still and said that they were helping her bring clothes to the naked woman who passed the selection. He nodded, and she went with the girls, brought them to the corner of the hall, dressed them in clean clothes, lined them up back to the block. There was a single mother there, Margit, her name. She was from Czechoslovakia, and she was frightened. Esther promised her that everything would be fine. She was afraid that they would hang both of them if they would catch them. When the block Altestay arrived, she saw them together. She hit Esther, but both remain alive. Please move the slide. What we can see here is the liberation photos of Esther. She's in the middle, smiling, maybe the first smile after a long, long time. I will cut short a little bit and say these things. Just a second. We can continue to tell more about Esther, even later during the death march and in Malchuf camp, where she arrived, and there she continued to care for her friend as much as she could do, while she was risking her life. But I will stop really here and conclude that we will probably never know. We will never know the true extent of the rescue operation that Esther performed. Esther was powerful in her personality, but very modest in everything she told about herself. Much of what we know about her today is thanks to what the survivors, other survivors, have told us about her. Unfortunately, not one of them is alive anymore. From this little story, we will all draw strengths of greatness of the human spirit in the most difficult moments of that remarkable woman, Esther Maestro-Zadikariyio. Yehi Zichra Baruch. Please move to the last screen. Thank you very much to your listening.
Wow, thank you very much, Rachel, for revealing Esther's amazing story to us. We deeply thank.
Good, how are you?
Well,
I just, with new hair, I don't want to, I have to be safe. No, they said it would actually be south. So, but.
Please let us finish. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, let me say that we at WHISC deeply thank the three speakers for the wonderful presentation. And now is the time for the audience to raise their questions to the presenters. Let me see on the chat if there is a question. Someone asks, is there a handout? No. No questions. Anyone at the audience? Questions for the presenters? Okay, that means either we are overwhelmed or we are tired. Yes, Carol, unmute yourself. Carol, unmute yourself.
Right.
Thank you.
First of all, thank you to everyone who gave presentations. My question is not so much about rescue, it's really about a comment that Bev, you made, if I heard you correctly in your presentation. You were talking about Pius XII. Now, anyone who knows me knows that I'm very critical of Pius XII, but you made a comment that Pius XII was refused to, am I correct on this, return children who had been saved by some Catholics. I just need a little clarification about what you were trying to say and what your research is, and is it based on the archives that have recently been opened at the Vatican?
Okay, to the best of my understanding, and I can clarify from the beginning, I have not had access to information.
You have to step away, Bev, you have to step away a bit from your microphone because you're kind of mushed up.
I'm sorry, I don't know what's happened to my microphone. Is this better?
It's okay.
It's better. It's a little bit, yeah.
It's
okay.
better.
It's a very tricky issue, Carol, as you know, it's a very hotly debated thing. And I remember when I attended the course at Yad Vashem, how hotly debated this particular question is and was about Pius XII. And yes, it's remarkable and wonderful that these orphanages and institutions and the Christian and Catholic institutions saved these children. I don't question that. But after the war, he was approached by the chief rabbi of Palestine at the time, the British Mandatory Palestine, to please encourage the orphanages that had rescued these children to give them back to the Jewish agencies that were seeking these children. And some did. Some actually were very honorable. One in particular is known to have not baptized children very deliberately in order to keep them safe, and did help to give them back. Others did support giving back as many children as wanted to go back. Some of the children themselves chose not to. They had found the sanctuary in the church very welcoming and safe, and they liked that and saved and chose to convert even. But there were others who would not release these children. And
no, I know that it's your comment about Pius XII.
Pius XII
it's your comment.
Would not agree to the rabbi's requests on 4 different occasions in, I think it was 1945 or 6, to encourage the institutions that had saved these children to give them back when they were approached. And whether this has been changed in the current information in the archives, which have been released now, I don't know. So I will acknowledge that this information may be new. But at the time of the readings that I have made, it was reported that he did not encourage the orphanages or the religious institutions that saved these children to give them back when they were approached by the Jewish agencies that were seeking them.
Thank you.
So if there's new information today, I don't know.
Thank you very much, Bev.
Thank you.
Any other questions, remarks? Okay, just to let you know that this session was recorded, and in a couple of days you can listen to it again on our website. I hope, or we hope, to see you on our next panel mentioned by Professor Lily Zamir. And good day or good night to all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for beautiful and interesting panel. And certainly for Beverley and Batya.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. See you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks very
Thank
much.
you.